Should we be concerned about the use of human enhancement drugs? Any kind of substance use, there's risks attached to that. To mitigate those harms, to reduce those risks, and to help those people manage their use of drugs, and to effectively reduce those harms, we must first of all engage with them effectively. We must be able to communicate with them. We must be able to find out what they are doing, why they're doing it, and what are the issues that affect them. What I aim to do is to outline not just how we need to do that to reduce the harms associated with human enhancement drugs, but if we get it right, this can bring benefits to the wider population. First of all, what are human enhancement drugs? We tend to think of drugs in two different categories. We think of those good drugs, the drugs that are prescribed by doctors that we get prescriptions from and pick them up from a pharmacy or perhaps buy them over the counter. Anything from simple analgesic to complex chemotherapy. These are all what we consider the illicit medicines. For illicit medicines or illegal drugs, we tend to think of the hedonistic pleasures. Obviously, we can misuse those so-called good drugs and they become those bad drugs, but we tend to think of those two different categories. For human enhancement drugs, it's a different category, and it borrows from both of those other two groups. What we see is the self-directed use in the same way that we have the self-directed psychoactive drug use, but rather than for immediate gratification or pleasure, it's for delayed satisfaction. It's for their functionality. It's for in some way to increase in beauty, in performance, in ability, in the satisfaction of achievement, delayed. So it's important to remember that these drugs are drawn from different categories, and it's the function that they're used for that are important. It's quite easy to think of this form of drug use as sort of modern or almost futuristic in some way, and it's not. While it's easy to think of popular fiction, films like Limitless, Lucy, but for every red pill, blue pill scenario, there's also a drink me potion from Alice in Wonderland. In fact, we can go right the way through, back into our historical background, to the art, through science, beliefs, mythology, and to see where this reoccurring theme of human enhancement comes up. This is a painting from the 16th century, and it depicts the fountain of youth. And on one side, we have the elderly, the infirm, the damaged, the poorly, either entering or being assisted into this pool of the fountain of youth. And on the other side, them re-emerging, rejuvenated, young, healthy, ready to take advantages of all the pleasures that are on offer. But we can go back even further than this, right the way back through to I suppose the foundations of our beliefs, the Old Testament, the tree of knowledge, the cognitive enhancement apple. We can see it in the Epic of Gilgamesh, over 4,000 years old, and the heroic exploits of pursuing the elixir of life. In the traditions of mythology of the Far East, we have the hare or the rabbit on the moon mixing the elixir of life in potions for those down on earth. So I would suggest that while we think of the medicalization of society and we think of how the breakthroughs that we've made in transportation, in pharmaceutical practices, in communication, in the internet, it's accelerated this whole issue of human enhancement drugs. But that isn't where the basis is. The basis goes right the way back. And in some cases, the pursuit is not only considered natural, it's also considered heroic. While there's nothing new around human enhancement drugs. It's only recently that we've started to think about them as a different category. And certainly over the last 10 years or so that we've broken them down into these different groups of to enhance musculature, that lean muscle mass, to facilitate weight loss, to change the skin or hair, to enhance cognitive function, to improve or enhance our sexual function and performance, or to change or enhance our mood and behaviour. The area that I've worked in for the last 30 years, and most of my research has taken place with, is in this group, around musculature. This is Dave Crossland, a mate of mine. And he's a big lad by anyone. He's not quite that big, but he's still a big lad by anyone's standards. And he got this big by the food he's eaten, by the extreme weights he's lifted, by the drugs he's taken. And he will be the first to explain and outline the adverse health conditions that affect him. We've got this really comprehensive evidence base now of the long-term effects of anabolic steroid use and associated drugs. And these affect the cardiovascular system, they affect the brain, the endocrine system, a whole range of different systems. They don't just affect muscles. It's a shotgun. It affects virtually every system of the body. And people taking sustained use of high-dosage anabolic steroids tend to exhibit adverse effects over time. Now, for us to, as I said before, to be able to reduce the harms, to minimize the adverse effects, we need to effectively engage with them. We need to effectively engage them on their own terms, in their own environments. We need to listen to them, understand what they're saying, what the important things are to them, and what they're experiencing, and why. But the reason I say we can gain benefits for wider society is because what we've seen time and time again, the use by this population, and we can think of it as these innovators. This is the work of Rogers, and it outlined this, how we adopt behaviours, beliefs, shopping, anything. We have innovators. We have early adopters, it comes to the majority, and then the laggards at the end of that sort of curve. And it still rings true today. When this was developed in the 60s, it was all around proximity. Now, with the internet, it's a bit messier, but the principles are still the same. You have people who are the innovators, the early adopters, and rather than the 2.5%, we're talking about the 1%, those enhanced bodybuilders who lead the way in the drugs that they use. And the point I'm making is that what is adopted by those early innovators, we see time and time again re-emerging in the general population, often causing far more harm. And my point is that not only do we need to engage with anabolic steroid users for their health benefits, we need to use them as sentinel population. We need to use them as an early warning system of what may happen to the wider population. Now, I'll give you a couple of examples. And it reads like a bad joke. What has a obsolete anesthetic agent, a novel peptide hormone, and a banned metabolic poison got in common? They were all adopted by anabolic steroid users, and then they subsequently re-emerged in the general population, which caused far more damage. And we didn't see it coming, and we should have done. And we need to make sure we don't make that mistake again. And that's why we need to monitor this sentinel population. So GHB, or G, this came to the forefront here in the 1990s as a dance drug, liquid ecstasy. And we saw that the dance club meccas around the globe, their A&E departments were absolutely full of unconscious patients because there were people who'd taken a slight overdose of GHB, sometimes with a bit of alcohol, unconscious, and in some cases, fatalities. It then re-emerged again as G, as in chemsex, being used to facilitate, to heighten sexual performance or continue it, or to even, I suppose, assist the disinhibition to people to take sexual risks that they wouldn't normally do. And this has huge consequences for sexual health. Then more recently again, it's just been reclassified in the UK because of its association as a serial sexual offence drug and also a series of murders. So we should have seen that when we saw that first emerge, we should have seen this potential to be adopted by the wider population. Melanotan II, it's a peptide hormone. What it does is it mimics the hormone melanin. So it produces pigmentation of the skin, a tanning. So it's sunless tanning, injectable product. When you think anabolic steroid users, those engaged in competitive bodybuilding, need that overall tan. You can see why it was early adopted by this population. Within a matter of years of its identification and discovery, it was being used by elite bodybuilders. What it quickly also gained a reputation for was of increasing libido and as a weight loss drug. We still didn't dawn on us how this was going to spread to the population. When you think, the sun, sex and slimming, it kind of sells itself to the wider population. But we still didn't put things in place or see it coming. The first thing we saw were in needle and syringe programs. These are programs set up for people who inject drugs to get clean injecting equipment. Where young women and teenage girls in some cases presenting for injecting equipment to inject the drug. These are naive drug users, naive injectors. It's great they're presenting to this service, but some of these, it wasn't the first time they'd injected. So you've got all those worries about blood-borne viruses. We should have seen it coming. For dinotrophenol, DMP. Now, this is a drug that's been around a long time. It was first identified in the First World War. And it was identified amongst munitions workers in French factories who taken seriously ill, in some case died, and the common feature that they had was weight loss and extreme body temperatures. Now, within a decade, it was being marketed as the most potent weight loss medication of all time, and it still is. But there's a problem with it. It has a very narrow therapeutic window, which means doesn't do much, is really effective, makes you very ill, kills you. When you bear in mind that this is not legitimately produced anymore, controlling the dosage is virtually impossible. So anyway, back to this point, in the 1930s, after this spate of deaths, it was removed. It was removed from the markets and it disappeared. It disappeared right the way through, apart from a few accidental industrial accidents involving fatalities. The actual deliberate use as a weight loss product disappeared completely until a very high-profile steroid guru discovered it, looking through, as many of these steroid gurus do, looking through old texts around different drugs that have either been removed from the market or never actually got to the marketplace. He identified this and he promoted it as the ultimate cutting agent. For bodybuilding, it's not just about the size. You need to reduce all the fat, literally as much of that fat as you possibly can. Doing that through a thermogenic agent by heating up the body temperature, shedding all that excess waste, as would be seen by a bodybuilder, is the holy grail for bodybuilding. And so it re-emerged. It re-emerged within this closed group of elite bodybuilders before it diffused to the wider steroid-using communities. But then, of course, we had the internet come along, and that kind of opened it up completely. So it went from being used by men who, some cases, 20 stone plus, to people searching the internet for weight loss products, sometimes for people trying to shed those last stubborn pounds or ounces. In many cases, people who have an eating disorder, who are underweight to start with, seeing this product and adopting the actual practices. And what we've seen there is a spate of fatalities amongst this vulnerable population. And again, we didn't see it coming. We didn't put things in place to be able to look at education, prevention, have services in place to actually support people and to, wherever possible, reduce the harms. We need to do that. So when I talk about us needing a surveillance system, it's not some high-tech intelligence system that we need. What we need is to effectively engage with this knowledgeable population, collect that data, provide that data to our policymakers to be listened to, and for that information to be put into effect. It's basic care, and we need to translate that basic care into future-proofing possible future drug harms, as we've seen in these cases. Thank you very much.